When Worlds Collide 1951 film. When Worlds Collide is a 1951 American science fiction disaster film released by Paramount Pictures. It was produced by George Pal, directed by Rudolph Maté, and stars Richard Derr, Barbara Rush, Peter Hansen, and John Hoyt. The film is based on the 1933 science fiction novel of the same name, co-written by Edwin Balmer and Philip Wylie. The film's storyline concerns the coming destruction of the Earth by a rogue star called Bellus and the desperate efforts to build a space ark to transport a group of men and women to Bellus' single planet, Zyra. Plot. In the prologue, quotes from the Book of Genesis are shown and narrated, describing God's decision to wipe out humanity. Pilot David Randall flies top-secret photographs from South African astronomer Dr. Emery Bronson to Dr. Cole Hendren in the United States. Hendren, with the assistance of his daughter Joyce, confirms their worst fears. Bronson has discovered that a rogue star named Bellus is on a collision course with Earth. Hendren warns the United Nations that the end of the world is little more than 8 months away. He pleads for the construction of arks to transport a lucky few to Zyra, the sole planet orbiting Bellus, in the faint hope that humanity can be saved from extinction. With other scientists scoffing at his claims, his proposal is rejected. Wealthy humanitarians arrange for a lease on a former proving ground to build an ark. To finance the construction, Hendren meets wheelchair-bound business magnate Sidney Stanton. Stanton demands the right to select the passengers in exchange for financing, but Hendren insists that he is not qualified to make those choices. All he can buy is a seat aboard the ark. Stanton capitulates. Joyce, attracted to Randall, persuades her father to keep him around, much to the annoyance of her boyfriend, medical Dr. Tony Drake. As Bellus nears, martial law is declared, and residents in coastal regions are evacuated to inland cities. Groups in other nations begin to build their own spaceships. Zyra makes a close approach first, causing massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis that wreak havoc around the world. Several people are killed at the camp, including Dr. Bronson. Afterward, Drake and Randall travel by helicopter to drop off supplies to people in distress in the surrounding area. When Randall gets off to rescue a little boy stranded on a rooftop in a flooded area, Drake flies away, but reconsiders and returns. As the day of doom approaches, the passengers are selected by lottery, though Hendren reserves seats for himself, Stanton, Joyce. He also includes the young boy who was rescued, raising the number of passengers to 45. Randall, feeling he lacks any necessary skills, rejects his reserved spot. He pretends to draw a lottery number, but Hendren knows better. For Joyce's sake, Drake tells Randall that Frey has a heart condition that may kill him during liftoff, convincing Randall he is needed as the co-pilot. The cynical Stanton fears what the desperate lottery losers will do, so he stockpiles weapons. When a young man turns in his winning number because his sweetheart was not selected, Ferris, Stanton's much-abused assistant, claims it at gunpoint, only to be shot dead by Stanton. Hendren agrees to the precaution of having the selected women board the ship, while the chosen men wait just outside. Shortly before blast-off, many of the lottery losers riot, seizing Stanton's weapons to try to force their way aboard. Hendren triggers the launch prematurely while he and Stanton are still outside, so the ship will consume less fuel on the journey. With an effort born of ultimate desperation, Stanton stands up and walks in a futile attempt to board the departing spaceship. The crew are rendered unconscious by the G-force of acceleration. When Randall comes to and sees Dr. Frey already awake and piloting the ship, he realizes he has been deceived. As the spaceship enters Zyra's atmosphere, the fuel runs out. Randall takes control and glides it to a safe landing. The crew finds Zyra to be habitable. David Randall and Joyce Hendren walk hand in hand down the ramp as a new day dawns. Cast: Richard Derr as David Randall, Barbara Rush as Joyce Hendren, Peter Hansen as Dr. Tony Drake, John Hoyt as Sidney Stanton, Larry Keating as Dr. Cole Hendren, Rachel Ames as Julie Cummings as Judith Ames, Stephen Chase as Dr. George Fry, Frank Cady as Harold Ferris, Hayden Rourke as Dr. Emery Bronson, Sandro Giglio as Dr. Ottinger, James C. as Donovan, uncredited, Kirk Allen as Rioter Bringing Guns, uncredited, Stuart Whitman as Rioter by Bank, uncredited, John Ridgely as Chief Customs Inspector, uncredited, Paul Frees as narrator/U.S. President, uncredited, Art Gilmore as Paul, uncredited. Production. Originally, producer-director Cecil B. DeMille considered adapting the novels When Worlds Collide and its sequel After Worlds Collide when they were first serialized in Blue Book magazine in 1933. Film rights accordingly were held by Paramount, who often worked with DeMille. In 1949 it was announced George Pal had purchased the screen rights. The film was to be directed by Irving Pitchell, who had just made The Great Rupert for Pal and was about to make Destination Moon for the producer. In December, Rip Van Ronkel, who wrote Destination Moon, was hired to do the script. In February 1950, it was announced the film would be made at Paramount. In August, Pal said the film would be the first made under a 3-picture deal with Paramount, the others being The Last Man in the World and a musical. The latter two were never made. When George Pal began his adaptation years later, he initially wanted to make a more lavish production with a larger budget, but he wound up being forced to scale back his plans. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was first considered for the role of Dave Randall, but Richard Derr was finally hired for the part. Chesley Bonestell worked as an advisor. He is credited with the artwork used for the film. He created the design for the space ark that was constructed. The final scene in the film, the sunrise landscape on Zyra, was taken from a Bonestell sketch. Because of budget constraints, the director was forced to use this color sketch rather than a finished matte painting. The sketch has visible artificial structures in the distance to the left and right as David Randall and Joyce Hendren leave the ark, suggesting an alien civilization. Filming started December 14, 1950 under the direction of Rudolph Maté. "I tried to make the story as realistic as I could," said Maté. Filming of the live-action scenes took 27 days, with the effects taking twice as long. The additional poor-quality still image showing a drowned New York City is often attributed to Bonestell, but was not actually drawn by him. UCLA differential analyzer is shown briefly near the beginning of the film. It verifies the initial handmade calculations confirming the coming destruction of the Earth. There is no error. Producer George Pal considered making a sequel based on the second novel, After Worlds Collide, but the box office failure of his Conquest of Space 1955 made that impossible. Reception. Critical. When Worlds Collide was reviewed by Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who noted that George Pal had followed up on his other prophetic epic, Destination Moon. This time the science soothsayer, whose forecasts have the virtue, at least, of being represented in provocative visual terms, offers rather cold comfort for those scholars who would string along. He reported that except for a rustle of applause to salute a perfect pancake landing, the drowsy audience at the Globe, where the film opened yesterday, showed slight interest. It appeared skeptical and even bored. Freelance writer Melvin E. Matthews calls the film a doomsday parable for the nuclear age of the 50s. Emory University physics professor Sidney Perkovitz notes that When Worlds Collide is the first in a long list of films where science wielded by a heroic scientist confronts a catastrophe. He calls the special effects exceptional. Librarian and filmographer Charles P. Mitchell was critical of the. He summarizes that the large number of plot defects are annoying and prevent this admirable effort from achieving top-drawer status. Awards. When Worlds Collide won an honorary Academy Award for special effects at the 24th Academy Awards. John F. Sates and W. Howard Green were also nominated for Best Cinematography Color, losing to Alfred Gilks and John Alton for An American in Paris. Comic book adaptation. The film was adapted into a comic book by George Evans. In popular culture, When Worlds Collide is one of the many films referenced in the opening theme science fiction/double feature of both the stage musical The Rocky Horror Show 1973 and its cinematic counterpart, The Rocky Horror Picture Show 1975. In the feature film Star Trek Roman II, The Wrath of Khan 1982, two cargo containers can be seen labeled Bellus and Zyra in the Genesis cave. In the film adaptation of L.A. Confidential 1997, tabloid writer Sid Hudgens arranges for the publicity-loving detective officer Jack Vincennes to arrest a young actor on the night of the premiere of When Worlds Collide. This results in photos being taken of the arrest, with the fictional El Cortes Theater, actually an abandoned bank building at 5620 Hollywood BLVD, redressed as a movie theater marquee in the background, accompanied by the headline, Movie Premiere, Pot Bust. The scene is set in 1953, long after the actual 19. When Worlds Collide is the title of a 1975 album. The related single is Did Worlds Collide? By Richard Hudson and John Ford, their third release after leaving Straub's. When Worlds Collide is the title of a single by the heavy metal band Paramount 5000 from the 1999 album Tonight the Stars Revolt. In Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter's 2013 novel The Long War, scientists have named the theoretical space object which obliterated one of the alternate Earths Bellus, which the character Sally Lindsay describes as some dumb old movie reference. Remake. The 1998 film Deep Impact originated as a combination of a remake of When Worlds Collide and an adaptation of the 1993 Arthur C. Clarke novel The Hammer of God, and the project was originally acknowledged as such, although the finished film did not acknowledge any of its sources since it was judged as being different enough to not require it.